Uh, I request all the students standing near the gate to kindly occupy the seats from the first row. Please start occupying seats. We are about to start. Kindly take your seats. Thank you. There are chairs here vacant in each section. Occupy them, please. I request everybody to be seated. We will be starting in a moment, and I request all of you to put your phones on silent. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In one of his presentations, Steve Jobs says, your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to do something which satisfies you is to do what you believe is great work. And to do great work is to love what you do. Dr. Bala V. Balachandran did exactly the same. His impact on the lives of those who were his friends, colleagues, and most importantly, students shines really bright and is a testament of his great work. Dr. Bala, or fondly known as Uncle Bala, was a transformative figure in management education. The founder of Great Lakes, which was established in 2004, he envisioned a globally benchmark business school in the hope that it becomes India's finest. Uncle Bala was also instrumental in shaping IIM Bangalore's initial faculty. He was also responsible in setting up MDI Gurgaon's management department. He also conceptualized the one-year MBA program at ISB. His contributions have left an indelible mark on the India's education landscape, earning him the Padma Shri in the year 2001, the fourth highest civilian award. To officially commence today's event, I invite our dignitaries for the ceremonial lighting of the lamp. Sir, can we please? I would now like to invite our guest, Dr. Sudhakar Balachandran, to extend our welcome to our guest, Dr. Mohan Ram, with the traditional Punadai. Sir. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the Dr. Bala V. Balachandran Memorial Lecture. The Great Lakes Institute of Management celebrates its visionary leader, the founder with the Dr. Bala V. Memorial Lecture, celebrating his extraordinary legacy and an extraordinary life. This lecture series brings together thought leaders, academicians, and industry professionals to honor Dr. Bala and his pioneering contributions to education and management. It serves as a platform to reflect on his vision and inspire future generations in the pursuit of academic excellence and impossible achievements. Before we begin, I would like to remind everybody here to ensure that the phones are on silent. This event is not just a memorial, but a celebration of life, a life which was extraordinarily lived. Professor Bala was a pioneer, a storyteller, an inspiration for all of us. His journey started from Pudukkottai and then went on to become a global leader in academic field. But his real gift was with his people, his students. He always empowered his students to achieve something bigger and made them realize the potential they possessed. For so many, he wasn't just Dr. Bala, founder, he was their beloved Uncle Bala, a guiding light who opened doors, who built new possibilities, and helped them see their own potential. His lessons were not confined to classrooms, they were lessons for life, instilling courage, resilience, and a deep sense of purpose in all who had the privilege to learn from him. We are here as a result of this dream that he had 20 years ago. Great Lakes was born by his unwavering dedication and belief in innovation and excellence. If you walk around campus, you'll see his favorite quotes etched in stone. And one of that stands out is, "Winners never quit, quitters never win." Even though he's no longer with us, his wisdom lives on, inspiring us to keep going and believing in ourselves. Today, we are also especially honored to have Dr. Partha Mohan Ram, the John H. Watson Chair in Value Investing at the Joseph L. Gottman School of Management, University of Toronto, here to deliver the inaugural lecture of this memorial series. We welcome you, sir. To commence today's proceeding, I would like to welcome Mr. Mohan Lakamraju, Chairman of Great Lakes Institute of Management, who will join us via Zoom to offer his reflections on the extraordinary vision and lasting legacy of Uncle Bala. Mr. Lakamraju has been a significant proponent of Professor Bala's vision, ensuring that it continues to inspire and guide us all. Sir, we are ready to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I request Sid to give a thumbs up if you can hear me? All right, perfect. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to speak to you all on this very august occasion of Dr. Bala's inaugural memorial lecture. Let me also extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Partha Mohan Ram for joining us on this occasion and giving it such a fitting start. Besides participating in this wonderful occasion, I'm sure Dr. Mohan Ram is also very happy to right now be in Chennai and not in Toronto, where my local friends there tell me it's minus 18 degrees. So we're happy to extend that warmth to you, Dr. Mohan Ram, both literally and figuratively. We are all here to celebrate Dr. Bala, his vision, and to remember what he most stood for. And what brought us all together is his dream, which is Great Lakes Institute of Management, this year celebrating its 20th year. I think you will all recall that the way he thought about this is that he wanted to do something in his Janmabhoomi, having spent most of his career in his Karmabhoomi, which is the United States, and in Northwestern, in Chicago in particular. He wanted to do something in his Janmabhoomi that puts it on the world map. And that's how the dream for Great Lakes was born. He wanted to have a center of excellence with global standards and global quality in Chennai. And I would say, while it may not have been completely realized, we are well on our way there. In these past 20 years, Great Lakes has taken great strides from very humble beginnings and has got to an enviable position as the youngest business school in India with a lot of accolades and recognitions to its credit. I'm sure you're all familiar with what those are, so I don't want to go and repeat all of those, and you would have heard those many times. What also gives me great satisfaction is the way in which we have gone about doing this. I first met Dr. Bala in 2009 when I got into education in India as well, when I came back from the United States myself. And we had a meeting of minds and an alignment of vision. I wanted to have world-class, high-quality education in India, reaching as many people as possible. Having set up Great Lakes in Chennai already, he wanted to see how the similar quality education could reach as many people as possible. And that's how we came together. And since then, we have worked together over a decade of a phenomenal collaboration and partnership. And what gives me the greatest satisfaction is the way we went about doing it, which is through a very, very firm belief in our values. Whatever the challenges that we faced, we never wavered from those values. And those values, I believe, are integrated into the culture that we have at Great Lakes. And this only makes me, feel good, because it's not about what you create alone, it's also how you do it. And the Dr. Bala always believed that as well, right? You can achieve greatness, but if you don't do it with the right set of values, people can get hurt in the process. Things can go wrong in the process. And we were always conscious of that. I'm sure you've all heard him repeat these many times. These are enshrined all around our campus. Some of the values that he speaks about: passion with compassion, ability with humility, success with integrity, and mobility with nobility. And I can truly put my hand on my heart and say that we have actually done everything that we did with those values. We have worked on inculcating those values into our culture in a very deep and fundamental manner, and we work hard towards inculcating those values in every batch of students that goes through our halls every year, right? So to me, it's not just the pursuit of our vision, it's how we do it that matters equally important. And that is something that both Dr. Bala and I agree on very strongly. Now, Dr. Bala, of course, also wanted to have the power of Great Lakes and the effectiveness of Great Lakes reach all four corners of India. Let's give him some slack, because he envisioned this in some sense before the internet really took off. So yes, we did realize that vision, but not only by having physical presence in all the four corners of India, but actually having digital presence all over the country. Yes, we have presence in North India as well, with our campus in Gurgaon. Beyond that, through our online programs, we have actually reached learners with high quality education all over the country, tens of thousands of them, right? So I very much view that as a realization of Dr. Bala's vision of taking high quality education without compromise to all corners of our country. Now, but of course, he didn't stop there. He's a dreamer, and he thought even beyond that. And some of you who have been associated with us for a long time would have heard him say that he wants to see a Nalanda in New York City, a Takshashila in Texas, and a Pushpagiri in Pittsburgh. So it's not just about having impact in India, but taking Indian value-centric quality education all over the world, right? So that's the global mindset's Indian roots. Now, we have been talking about international expansion for a while, and while we haven't done anything concrete, it's always a question to think about whether in today's day and age it makes sense to do that physically or digitally, right? So that part of the vision is yet to be realized, but I can assure you all it's very much in our minds. And how it plays out the next few years will decide. The good news is that when we partnered, Dr. Bala was wise. He chose a partner who was much, much younger, in fact, half his age. So time is on our side, God willing, right? And so Sid and I consider both of us as young. Gautam is definitely younger, and as are most of the folks that are associated with us. So we have time on our hands to do what we need to do to realize all of Dr. Bala's vision. I think it's all on the table. I think it's all doable. I think we are very well equipped to actually realize all of it. So his vision, his values continue to inspire me, continue to motivate me, and continue to guide me. I think there are so many times when having discussions and meetings and decision making we ask ourselves the question, okay, what would Dr. Bala say in this situation? What would he do in this situation? And that doesn't mean that I always agreed with him. There are many times where I have had to convince him other way to his initial position, and it is credit to his agility of his mind that when presented with new information and new facts, he actually changed his mind. Even in his 80s, I challenge how many of us will be able to do that, when we are in our 80s, where we are able to actually change our mind, right? So suffice it to say that, like most of you, I have been deeply impacted by my association with him. I continue to cherish the time that I have spent with him. I continue to be inspired and guided by his being, his vision, and his values. And I think today's lecture is a great occasion for us to remember all of that and to hear from our distinguished speaker and get some valuable insights. I wish this lecture the very best, and I thank Dr. Mohan Ram one more time for joining us and doing the honors on this auspicious occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for those inspiring words. We now have a special audio-visual presentation video that takes us through Professor Bala's incredible journey, his values, and the lives he touched along the way. This will be more than a biography. It gives us a deeper understanding of a man who lived by the ideals of dreaming big and never giving up. Let us now take a moment to reflect on his legacy and to dream big through this video. Thank you. There cannot be better tribute to Uncle Bala's legacy, then continuing on the tradition of insightful discourse and discussions. It is now my honor to invite Mr. Gautam Lakamraju, COO and board member at Great Lakes, to introduce this lecture series. Having worked alongside Professor Bala, Sir brings a distinctive purpose and perspective of how his vision continues to impact our institution and extends beyond. Sir.
Good morning, everyone. This is a very important occasion because we are realizing, a dream of ours to capture Dr. Bala's legacy, right? I met him when I was about 20 years old, 4 years out of business school. Dr. Bala was an academic giant, having, been in business schools, teaching thousands of students for over 4 decades, having built multiple institutions. So it was very easy to get intimidated. But Dr. Bala was such an amazing person that anybody who has ever met him always remembers him with a smile, right? He would always find something that would put you at ease, that would make you smile, right? And go back from the interaction with warmth. So it is something that's a deeply personal loss, having lost him in 2021. Unfortunately, that was post-COVID, so we had actually not interacted with him for some time, though he was all throughout, whether he was in US, whether he was in India, he always stayed connected with everyone around. And some of the things that, some of the people, let's say, have been interacting over the years, even after his passing away, remember him so fondly, almost as though they have met him yesterday. There are many people I met from very different spheres of life, actors, politicians, bureaucrats, right? You not associate them with somebody like Dr. Bala, who's in the academic area, but they would all come and say, oh, Dr. Bala, I had met him once, right? That could be 10 years back, that could be 15 years back. And they would always, talk about him with a sense of warmth, sense of pride, having met him, right? So when we lost him, we were all obviously, very deeply saddened, but then we wanted to ensure that the legacy lives on. So one of the things that we obviously did was to build a memorial. Many of you have been part of that process. The Great Lakes campus is something Dr. Bala would call his third child, right? And sometimes he would joke that it's dearer to him than his first two. No offense, Sid. But so we wanted to have his spirit captured in this campus through the memorial, and for everybody who walks through these corridors to know about him and our roots, right? And the values that he imbibed on us, the values that Mohan mentioned, they're actually etched in stone in our Great Lakes Gurgaon campus as well. I wanted to, while we were setting up the campus, wanted to embody his spirit there. So they're actually captured in stone in the reception area, that anybody who walks into the Gurgaon campus would first see them, right? So in the memorial, again, we tried to do that. And all of you would have gone there, but any of you who have not been there, please go through that, walk through those corridors, and you get a sense of his life, his achievements, and his contribution to the global academia, but also particularly to the country, right? Here's somebody who did not have to do all of this, definitely did not have to take the effort at his age of 67. And as you would say, it was after he had a quintuple bypass surgery, right? He definitely didn't have to do that, right? That's when most of us look for retirement these days. You have enough podcasters talking about retiring at 40, right? And he was there, based in US, trying to build an institution in India. He was not a businessman. He was not a politician, not a builder. He was just an academician trying to build a world-class institution, right? So yes, he was very successful with that. And I think the memorial in the campus captures that. But then Dr. Bala was more than, um, you know, um, buildings. He was never about, um, just having, a world-class campus, right? First and foremost, he was all about people, right? Even when we didn't have this campus in the very first year, right, in Saidapet, where we were operating out of a small residential building, what he could bring was the best of global intellect into the campus. We had some amazing academic legends coming and mentoring our students, sharing their perspectives, whether it's from the academia or from the industry. Our business and academic advisory councils are full of luminaries who are recognized globally. So Dr. Bala truly embodied, as you saw in the video, his oft-repeated quote of "your network is your net worth," right? And that's the capital Great Lakes had when we started. There was no other capital, right? No endowments, no donations from large corporates. Of course, some of the corporate groups did help us, but the true capital was Dr. Bala's network, and we built from there. And one of the things that was very striking is when COVID happened, unfortunately, and we were stuck. And the government said you can't start the programs till, let's say, August. We are supposed to start our programs, the PGPM, in I think May, right? So Dr. Bala did not want our students to lose out on 3 months of not doing anything, right? So in a span of about 2 weeks, he put together a program. We called it Term Zero. Apart from a lot of different activities, we had a thought leader series. We invited 10 distinguished thought leaders from around the world, and that actually included 4 deans of the top 5 business schools in the world. Professor Shrikant Datta from Harvard, Professor Madhav Rajan, Professor Sunil Chopra, and then Dean Deepak Jain. 4 of them took sessions for our students in a period of 10 days. I don't think that could have happened anywhere in the world, right? Not in their institutions, right? So that was the true greatness of Dr. Bala and the relations he built over a period of time. He helped everyone he could, and he truly embodied our Great Lakes motto of global mindset, Indian roots, always trying to bring the best of the world into our campus here to the other schools that he helped establish. So the second initiative that we thought would truly be a tribute to his legacy is to continue the tradition of bringing global thought leaders and helping our students here, helping all our stakeholders here benefit from their perspectives, right? So when I propose and discuss this thought leader series, the memorial lecture with the board and especially with Professor Sudhakar, he was absolutely delighted, but also he took the lead in making this happen. So thank you, Professor Sudhakar. And today is a realization of this initiative. It's something that's going to continue for many, many years. So this is a very special occasion. And what is even more delightful is that we could have somebody of the stature of Professor Partha Mohan Ram being here as a first memorial lecture speaker. And it's a coincidence that, or not coincidence, but let's say a design, that he is also in the area of accounting, which is where Dr. Bala was in. But again, some people would joke that Professor Bala was less of an accounting professor, more of a marketing professor, right? And in fact, a lot of students say they learned more about other things in life, the more valuable things in life than accounting from his class, right? And that's what they remember. But nevertheless, I think it's great to start the session, the lecture series with Professor Partha Mohan Ram, and I'm sure this is something that is going to be very memorable for all of us. Both the occasion and the topic itself is a very interesting topic, but I'll let Professor Sudhakar speak more. I'll conclude now, and in terms of having um, um, a fulfillment of having realizing this initiative, and I request everybody to benefit from this, but also nurture this lecture series in the years to come. Thank you, everyone.
It is my privilege to now invite Dr. Sudhakar Balachandran, member of the board at Great Lakes Institute of Management. Sir is a professor and director of MBA Graduate Studies Department of Accounting at University of Illinois, Chicago, to deliver the welcome address and introduce our keynote speaker for today's lecture, Dr. Partha Sarthi Mondra. Sir, thank you.
Thank you all. Welcome, and thank you all for coming and joining us for this momentous occasion. It is really an honor to kick off a lecture series in memory of my father. I think if I think about how he would want to be remembered, it would probably be this way. His legacy was a legacy of ideas, which he then looked to turn into action. Okay, so as Gautam brought this to me, while I was enthusiastic about it, I was also, painfully aware of the magnitude of the task of finding someone that can convey with academic gravitas something along the lines of the kind of import that my father had in his work, right? But honestly, it didn't take me long to think about who I would ask. Okay, I immediately picked up the phone. I contacted my dear friend, Professor Partha Mohanram, Partha, who I've known for nearly 30 years. Because the reasons why he should be the inaugural speaker in this series were painfully obvious, and let me explain them. First of all, he is a scholar par excellence. Okay? He focuses in an area that is of critical importance, and he does it in a way that brings significant academic rigor. Partha never says anything that he can't back up with data, with references, with economic reason, with sound logic. He doesn't speculate. His goal is, let's take an important subject and let's make sure that we and ask, what are the big unanswered questions in this area, right? Why are they important? Why should we answer them? He's never, in much of research and academic research, you'll often hear people say, people have checked if A is related to B, and people have checked if B is related to C, but no one has ever checked if C is related to A. And so that's my motivation, because no one's ever done it. Partha's general notion is, well, if no one's ever done it, there might be a good reason why no one's ever done it. And that's not significant grounds to jump in. Can I steal your story? He said, there's this thing called ice cream, and it's delicious. And there's this thing called ketchup, and it's also delicious. But no one has ever combined these two things. So I'm going to do that. And I think you get the point, right? You have to make sure that what you're looking at not only is something that hasn't been looked at, not only something that we don't have the answer to, but it's actually important to look at the answer to. It's obvious that if you figure out the answer, you will have something that tastes good and not something that tastes awful, right? And so his quest has always been to focus on those big pictures, right? Anytime he and I have written 3 research papers together, anytime I bring the ideas to him, his first questions to me are always, why do we care? Why is this important? What difference will it make? What will it change? How will it affect how something is done? or how something is thought of. And that's a tradition he's grown up with. That's a tradition that my father always embraced. And so it's that ethos that makes him a great scholar. He's been prolific in his publications and his own work, but similar to my father, he's been great about bringing people along with him. Okay? Partha has 2 or 3 great co-authors that he's worked with over the years. And then over time, it's expanded to a larger set. And then as he became a senior professor, the number of PhD students he's influenced. And now the number of their PhD students he's influencing, right, is a legacy that's going to resonate over the years in academia. Okay? Partha invests in people, he invests time in people, and it's not just in his research. The other part that's very important, you'll see this often, there are leading academic scholars who are often a complete disaster in the classroom. Partha takes the task of making sure people understand the subject he's teaching to heart, personally, seriously, and he invests significant time and effort in being a great teacher. Right? When you take his valuation class, you know valuation and you walk out of there knowing it better than some of the hedge fund guys on Wall Street. And that's the mission. Okay? It's this level of seeking excellence. It's this level of being steered by a few basic values that have led Partha to achieve some of the awards that he's gotten. In the Canadian Accounting Association, they have given him their highest honor, the Haim Falk Lifetime Achievement Award. Okay. Okay. I'm sure when the University of Toronto was given an endowment by John Watson, it became quite obvious that that chair should go to Dr. Partha Mohanram, the John H. Watson Chair in Value Investing. He seeks out big topics. He seeks today to share with you those topics. He seeks to help you understand why they're important and why it makes a difference to understand these things. This is not about mugging up the day before and passing an exam. This is about skills that make a difference in life. That's what Great Lakes is about. That's what Dr. Bala was about. That's what Dr. Mohanram is about. Now, more importantly, on a personal note, we have been, in no particular order, dear friends, brothers, fierce warriors on the tennis court, partners in doubles who will not let anyone take a point from us, okay, and family. So it's really my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome Partha so that he may give the inaugural Bala v. Balachandran Memorial Lecture at Great Lakes Institute of Management. So please, everyone, put your hands together, Dr. Partha Mohan.
Good? Okay. So firstly, thank you, Sid, for the extremely kind words. Thank you, everyone, distinguished guests, students, everybody else, for this opportunity. When Sid called me a couple of months ago and asked me whether I wanted to do this, firstly, I was like flabbergasted because not only was this the Balachandran Memorial Lecture, this was the inaugural Balachandran Memorial Lecture. So the way I thought about it is, if it goes really well, great. If it goes really badly, the second person is going to look really good. So either way, it's win-win, right? So I think it's So I said, I'm going to do this. Okay. And so as Sid said, Sid and I have been close friends we actually met in 1995. So it's 30 years now. So in the PhD program at Harvard, and then we were colleagues at Columbia for a long time and have been a co-author on a number of projects. Now, before I start, I know you guys have seen videos about Bala. I just want to mention a couple of things. I knew Bala first as Sid's dad. Remember, this is the early days of internet. You couldn't just go and look up stuff and also. It's only later I found out what an amazingly eminent academic he was and what a builder of institutions that he turned out to be. The thing which distinguished Bala was Bala treated everybody the same with respect and kindness. The line I'd like to use is, whether you're the PM or whether you're a PA, you are treated with the same level of respect by Bala. And that should be a learning for all of you. You know, irrespective of how successful you become, how rich you become in life, you know, just keep that perspective in mind. Treat everybody with respect. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to move on to my topic. How much time do I have? Okay, excellent. Okay, and so we'll try to do Q&A at the end, but if something is really not clear, I'd be happy to take questions in between as well, but I think it should be reasonably straightforward. So the topic for today's presentation is stock picking, insights from academic research. So basically, this is a little bit about my own journey. So I did my undergrad here, close by at IIT Madras, in computer science, as it turns out. So for those of you who are like, oh man, this accounting stuff is really difficult and all those kind of things, I am a non-accountant who teaches accounting. So you guys can do it, okay? All right. I did my MBA from IMA and my PhD from Harvard, where I met Sid. And I used to be at the faculty of NYU first and then later at Columbia, where we were colleagues. And now for the last 15 years or so, I've been a professor at the Rotman School of Management. My research is in the areas of valuation, fundamental analysis using financial statements, cost of capital. I've also done some research in areas like disclosure and regulations, governance, and so on. And I'm the editor-in-chief of Contemporary Accounting Research, which is one of the top-tier accounting journals. It's in the FT 50 ranking of top academic journals. So the basic idea of today's talk is how can academic research give you some guidance on stock picking? And what do I mean by stock picking? By stock picking, should I be standing there so that people on both sides can probably see me better, or okay, so this way I guess I can be reasonably, I don't want people there to struggle. So all right, so if you think about stock picking, it's deciding which stock should I buy, which stock should I sell, which stock should I short, if that's something I want to do. And that's something that all investors, especially if you're in the asset management industry, you've got to make decisions about. So there are a whole lot of different ways you can do it. Fundamentally, I mean, you can think about a fundamental approach or a technical approach. Fundamental approach is where you look at a stock, you look at its prospects, you figure out what the intrinsic value of the stock is, you compare it to its prevailing stock price and say, okay, this is much higher or much lower, therefore I should buy or sell or short or whatever the case might be. In technical analysis, you're making the same decisions, but instead of looking at like the strategy and the fundamentals, you're actually looking at the stock prices. Okay, you're looking at the stock prices and then you decide, okay, based on the support lines and splines and stuff. I mean, I don't know anything about technical analysis, but that's basically how it works. But you're still making the same kind of decision. Okay, you can also do this in a small sample or a large sample. What do I mean is, to do a large sample, if you're one of those quants, you're looking at the universe of stocks. You might be looking at 5,000 stocks, running these complex econometric models, coming up with like some 50 stocks you think should be potential targets for buying, and 50 stocks which are surely targets for selling or shorting or whatever the case might be. All right. But despite the differences, okay, there are some commonalities in the basic ideas of stock picking. One is you have this basic notion that while markets might be efficient, stocks can get mispriced. So you can identify some stocks which are overvalued and some stocks which are undervalued. But the more important thing is that you believe that this misvaluation is likely to be corrected. So for example, let's say I believe that Tesla is worth $100. And right now, Tesla is worth $400, right? And I can give you all kinds of reasons why Tesla is overvalued 4x. But if that overvaluation is going to persist for a while, for whatever reason, why the market seems to believe Elon Musk's story, they are valuing his relationship with the incoming president, whatever the case might be, that's a misvaluation which is not going to be corrected. One thing one thing you'll realize is I love making analogies like the SketchUp and ice cream analogy. So I'm going to make one more. So let's say you are I'm sure many of you have, some of you might be chemical engineers, but all of you have done chemistry in high school, right? So let's just say, what is the chemical composition of coal? It's carbon. What is the chemical composition of diamond? It's also carbon. So you can do some math and say, I did some math. I can get 1 gram of carbon for 1/10 of 1 rupee if I was to get it in the coal, right? But the same 1 gram of carbon is costing me like $1 million if it's a diamond. This is clearly a misvaluation. So I'm going to go long on coal and short on diamond, and I'm going to make lots of money. Unfortunately, this is a strategy which is not going to work. If you have any doubts, right, when you are about to propose to your significant other, try giving them a gram of coal. It's not going to work out, okay? So society has just decided that this is worth more than something else. So that's an example of a quote-unquote inefficiency which is never going to resolve itself, okay? All right. So the basic idea of this talk is, can academic research guide us in stock picking? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few topics and try to spend around 10 minutes on each of them. And to the largest extent possible, I'll try to speak in as close to plain English as possible, avoiding excessive use of jargon or something very technical on the academic side. I will assume that all of you have a basic understanding of financial statements and terminologies, but nothing more than that, okay? So the first topic is earnings versus cash flows. And I'll discuss something called the accrual anomaly. The second topic is how you can apply financial statement analysis for value and growth stock investing. The third topic is, very briefly, we'll talk about how you can use formal valuation approaches to value stocks and try to use that for stock picking. And the fourth topic is going to be combining the second and the third, how you can use financial statement analysis in conjunction with these formal valuation models. And last, briefly, I'll talk about how can we try to think about the valuation of stocks in the AI space, which is this important topic that everybody is talking about these days. All right. So the research on which many of my points are going to be based, and these are going to be based partly on papers I have done and partly on papers that other people have also done. It's going to be largely US based in terms of the analysis underlying this research, but I think the implications are universal. Okay, so let's talk about earnings versus cash flows. What do I mean by that? So, in your finance class, I'm sure you've heard this thing that, cash is real, cash is king, earnings are this accounting fiction. Nobody really cares, or people should be careful about earnings because it's a fictitious number that some accountants make up using assumptions like, depreciation and, revenue recognition and all those different things. So which is more important for valuation? And we can ask this question on average and on the margin. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. So this is based on two very, very influential papers by two top scholars in accounting. One is a paper by Dichow in 1994, and the second is a paper by Sloan in 1996. So let's just briefly talk about this thing at a conceptual level. When I talk about earnings, I'm talking about net income, bottom line, earnings per share, or whatever you want to call it, for a firm, using that as a metric of performance. When I talk about cash flows, I'm talking about cash from operations. And so if you think about what these two things are, they're both measures of performance. One is an accounting or accrual-based measure of performance. one is a cash flow-based measure of performance. So if you just do a thought experiment and ask yourself, which should matter more, you can actually make arguments for each of these measures. So on the accounting side, you can say that investors focus on earnings. People say that so-and-so company is going to release its earnings. Its earnings per share for this quarter is $1.50 or 15 rupees or whatever the case might be. Nobody says so-and-so is going to release its cash flows. It's always the focus is on earnings. Okay. Earnings is also considered to be a better measure of value added. What do I mean by that? If you have made a sale this quarter, just because you haven't collected the money fully this quarter, doesn't mean that sale doesn't belong to this quarter. So what the accounting system will tell you is, you know what, record that as a sale and count that as revenue, which means it's going to be part of net income, even though you haven't got the cash for it. I'll record it as a receivable, and to account for the risk that it may not get collected, I will do an allowance for bad debts or whatever the case might be. So that's how the accounting system handles it. But what ends up happening is earnings and cash flows will be different because of accounting decisions like this. Also, these things also ensure that the earnings number is a little less volatile, because you don't have to worry about the vagaries of collection and so on and so forth. Earnings numbers tend to be a little more smooth. And smooth numbers are better for things like projection, and it's very difficult to project numbers which are extremely volatile. But on the other hand, there's a criticism of earnings that earnings are a fiction. Earnings can be manipulated. Cash is real. Cash is tangible. If somebody comes to you and says, pay me, you can't tell them, I don't have any cash, but here are some accruals. You got to pay people with cash. Okay. In the long run, cash is what matters. If you're a company which is constantly generating high earnings, but has very little cash to show for it, this is what you will call low quality earnings. Okay. Also, earnings are more easily manipulated. You can manipulate cash flows too, but earnings are more easily manipulated. So the bottom line is it's unclear which of these two metrics should matter more for the stock market. So what Patricia Dichow did in her paper, and I've given the citation here, is she actually tested it to see, let's run a horse race between earnings and cash flows. Which of these metrics has a stronger correlation with stock market returns? And what she found was it's a slam dunk. Earnings are much stronger in terms of their correlation with stock prices and stock returns. And what is interesting is she showed, even if you care more about cash flows, you will forecast cash flows from earnings, or you'll infer the cash flows from earnings. So for those of you who have done like DCF modeling and stuff, you come up with these pro forma numbers, you don't forecast cash flows directly. You come up with an earnings model, you forecast earnings, and then from the earnings, you infer the cash flows. So what that means is, even if you care about cash flows, you ought to care about earnings. Okay, that is the finding of her paper. And part of it is it's probably a self-fulfilling prophecy. People in the stock market care more about earnings, and therefore earnings are more important. Okay, nobody talks about, let's look at the PC ratio for this company, but a lot of people talk about, let's look at the PE ratio for this company, for instance. So this might lead you to believe that earnings are important, cash flows are not important. But that is not correct. And that is what the next paper looks at. So Sloan, a paper which he published in 1996, looks at something called the accrual anomaly. So what is an accrual anomaly? Accruals are the difference between earnings and cash flows. It's a summary of all the accounting decisions that you have made, which causes earnings to either be above or below cash flows. So what he found is when firms have high accruals, and what I mean by high accruals is when they have high earnings relative to cash flows, thus those firms perform poorly in the year afterwards. On the other hand, when firms have low accruals, those firms perform very strongly in the future years. Basically, he actually comes up with what is called a long short strategy, where he said, let's invest in all these low accrual firms and let's sell or short all these high accrual firms. And he shows that you can earn consistent returns with 1 year as an exception for the strategy. Now, why does he find this? Basically, accruals tend to reverse. When you have, let's say, in 1 year, if your earnings are boosted because you made lots of sales without much collection, okay, in the next year, the reverse will happen. You'll have the accruals will sort of dissipate. Markets don't completely understand this differential sort of persistence. And that's why they're constantly surprised when high accrual firms have weaker performance and low accrual firms will have an improvement in performance. Markets don't realize this. And that is what causes this accrual anomaly effect. Now, one thing to be careful about is whenever you have somebody, whether the person is an academic or a hedge fund manager, who comes up to you and says, I've come up with this awesome strategy and it's generating lots of returns. You can see I've back tested it. Here are all the returns. There could be two reasons why you're getting returns. One is it's mispricing, which is what this person is trying to tell you, that they have identified mispricing and they want you to invest money so you can exploit that mispricing. And the second reason is it's actually risk. So one thing you learn about in finance is whenever you see a return, you got to control for risk. Suppose you generate lots of high returns, but you're generating high returns because you're literally betting your house in Vegas all the time. Well, that is the reason why you're getting high returns, because you're taking a lot of risk. So it's important to look, is there some hidden risk which is causing these returns? Now, a lot of research looked into it and they show that it's actually not risk, it's probably mispriced. What is more interesting is there have been a number of papers which have shown that this accrual anomaly has essentially disappeared, at least in the US capital markets, since the year 2000. Now, why has it disappeared? There have been a number of explanations. One explanation is it's disappeared because you identified the thing. Lots of people put money into it. Once you put money into it, that effect dissipates away. There was an arbitrage opportunity, and now people have gone into it, and therefore the arbitrage opportunity has weakened. The second reason is accounting standards have gotten better. So the ability to manipulate numbers with accounting, if that was the driver of the accrual anomaly, has become weaker over time. And the third explanation, which is the paper which I worked on, I show that what has changed, at least in the US markets, is if you look at analysts used to earlier on only forecast earnings. Now analysts are forecasting earnings and cash flows. So when you're forecasting earnings and cash flows, you are in a sense forecasting accruals. So when you're forecasting accruals, the reason for the accrual anomaly, which is, let's say, poor information, weakens, and therefore the anomaly has gone away. So I just want to show this graphically. This is in one of the papers I wrote. The line in blue is the returns to the accrual anomaly. As you guys can see, it was very strong initially, and then it has become much weaker. The line in red is the proportion of firms for which analysts issue cash flow forecasts. So of course, this is just a graph. It's not proof. I have other tables in my paper as well. But this sort of shows that as the proportion of analysts who give these forecasts increases, the returns to this accrual anomaly have weakened. Okay. All right. So let's now move to the second topic. Fundamental analysis for value and growth stocks. How do you apply fundamental analysis or financial statement analysis contextually to value or to identify winners and losers in value stocks and growth stocks? And this is based on two papers. One of them is this paper by Piotrowski, who's now a professor at Stanford. He came up with this index called the F-score index. And the second is my paper from 2005, where I came up with this index called the G-score index. So what are value stocks and what are growth stocks? They probably have different words for them. But value stocks essentially are stocks which have lower valuation, where if you think about valuation from the ratios like price to earnings ratio or price to book ratio, their valuation would be lower. On the other hand, growth stocks are the ones, or they're also referred to as glamour stocks. They are the darlings of the stock market. These have higher valuation ratio. So if you were look at it today, you would say that Tesla is a growth stock, or you would say Netflix is a growth stock, or you would say Nvidia is a growth stock. Okay, so there has been an effect identified for a long time. It's not necessarily true in the last few years, called the value or value growth or value glamour effect, which is that value stocks in general have performed better than growth stocks. And this is essentially the idea of Warren Buffett's investing style. While recently Warren Buffett may have invested in Microsoft and so on and so forth, he made his money by investing in Geico. He made his money by investing in railroads. So he took stable, solid businesses which had like high cash flows, but not that high valuations. And he found that that is a much safer way of making money than trying to invest in the next Amazon. So if you think about, if you're a growth investor, or you might invest in Amazon, or you might invest in NVIDIA. But to get that Amazon and NVIDIA, you're probably also investing in 50 other really, really high valuation stocks, which may turn out to be duds. So on average, you're probably better off with a value investing strategy. However, this is an on average effect. There's a lot of variation. Some of those value stocks, the reason why they have low valuation ratios is because they're crappy firms. And some of those growth firms are going to become the next NVIDIA. They're going to become the next Amazon. They're going to become the next Google. The question is, can you apply this sort of financial statement analysis, or fundamental analysis to find winners and losers in these two segments of stocks? Okay, so fundamental analysis in value firms, and this is what Piotrowski looked at in his paper published in the year 2000. So Piotrowski looked at value firms, like I said, firms which have low valuation ratios. And what his argument was, these are firms which are quote unquote being ignored by the stock market. People aren't paying that much attention to them. Because they're being ignored, it's possible there is information in those financial statements in the public domain that people just haven't looked at carefully enough. So can I do some very basic ratio analysis? So for example, in your finance and accounting classes, you've probably studied the sort of DuPont framework, right? When you look at ratios, look at a firm's profitability, you look at a firm's profitability and you break it down into asset turnover and profit margin and current ratio and all those kinds of things. So he comes up with a bunch of ratio-based screens and saying that, okay, let me identify firms whose ratios are getting better. So he comes up with a score called F-score based on financial statement indicators. And the F-score screens are things like, are you profitable? Are you more profitable than you were last year? Is your asset turnover increasing? Is your profit margin increasing? Is your current ratio increasing? Is your leverage ratio decreasing? So he comes up with a bunch of these screens and he comes up with an index called the F-score. And he says, here is the deal. If markets are efficient, this F-score should not predict stock returns. But if the markets have not been doing what I've been doing, high F-score firms should earn high returns, low F-score firms should earn low returns. I'm going to go long in these high F-score firms. I'm going to short the low F-score firms. What happens? So basically, so here's the deal. If you have a return graph, which looks like the skyline of Manhattan, you're in good shape, right? Which means that you have lots of periods where you're generating high returns, very few times when you generate low returns, okay? And that's what he finds in his paper. Now, if you think about the implications of his results, he says that financial statement analysis or fundamental analysis is really helpful in identifying diamonds in the rough. What do I mean by that? These are firms which in general have poor valuation ratios. That is, the market is discounting all of them. But in this group of firms, there are some which are well above their station. Like, this firm should have a P ratio of 25, not a P ratio of 10, based on how strong it is. And his strategies are good at identifying this approach. So the question to ask, but he only looks at it in value firms. So what I asked in my paper, which is the next slide, is does this work for growth firms? Can you modify it in a way that makes more sense for growth firms? Now, what I did in my paper, let me explain why I did what I did. Many people basically said, you know what? Fundamental analysis cannot work for growth firms. Why? Growth firms are not valued on fundamentals. They're valued on something else. Plus, they are so early in their process that many of these ratios don't make sense. These are loss-making firms. They're growing very rapidly. The numbers are sort of not in equilibrium. So you really can't make sense of it. So I made a couple of decision choices. The first thing I said was, maybe your numbers are noisy and all over the place and you have losses and stuff, but you can still do comparative analysis, right? So let me compare your firm with other growth firms in the same industry and stuff. So instead of just doing like comparing the firm to itself, I said, let's compare the firm to its peers. That's the first thing I did. The second thing I did was I looked at this idea of variability or stability. I said, let's say you have two growth firms. Both of them have high earnings. Both of them have high valuation ratios because they've done well this year or whatever, and the market's happy. One of them has very volatile earnings, and one of them has very stable earnings. Which one should you invest in? You should invest in the one with stable earnings. Why? The one with stable earnings, odds are the earnings tomorrow are also going to be high. The one with volatile earnings could have had high earnings this year because of fluke. And the volatility might affect itself, and you might have low earnings tomorrow and you'll be disappointed. So I looked at that. Also, these firms are being identified or valued on the basis of growth. So I looked at the volatility of growth as well. If you've had stable, steady growth in earnings, growth in sales or whatever, versus volatile growth, you should focus on the firms with more stable growth. The next thing I also looked at was growth firms are being valued for their growth potential. What are you doing for growth potential? Are you investing in those things which lead to growth? So what are things which lead to growth? R&D, capital expenditure, advertising. All these things means that you are investing, you're actually spending dollars today, which actually depress your current earnings. R&D forces you to take expense, but you might generate future revenues in the future. So I created this index called the G-score. And what I showed was, you can see another Manhattan skyline. Okay, you have good returns consistent over a number of years. Now, if you just think about what my strategy does, I'm looking at growth firms. These are firms which have high valuation ratios to begin with. So it's very difficult to identify firms which are going to have tremendous returns because they've already had high valuations. So earlier, I was finding diamonds in the rough. Here, everybody has a diamond valuation. What I'm doing is I'm identifying the real diamonds from the cubic zirconia, the fake diamonds. That is what my strategy is trying to do. This company has the potential of being the next Amazon, and this company has the potential of being the next drcoop.com, which is one of those 1,000 internet companies you've never heard of because it went bankrupt. Okay, anyway. How have G-score and F-score done in recent years? Now, this is not something which I have done, but there's a very interesting website called validia.com. Okay, it's a mix of the word valid and idea, validia.com. What these guys do is they implement what they call guru portfolios. So they look, either it could be somebody from academics or somebody from the real world. So they'll have like a Peter Lynch portfolio, a Warren Buffett portfolio. They have a Joe Piotrowski portfolio, and they have a portfolio in my name as well. And they essentially, what they have shown is, and firstly, they change it. They do long only. They're not doing a long short strategy. They only perform, they're looking at the best of the lot. And I have to give you this caveat. The last 10 years or so, growth firms have done incredibly well. So that itself will certainly bias the results towards a G-score. Having said that, it's still pretty impressive. This is how the Piotrowski index has done. As you guys can see, in the last 20 years, it's returned 300%, which actually has underperformed the market, especially recently. So the line in this sort of blue graph is what this index as F-score would have done. The light blue is what the index would have done. You'd have been okay just buying the index. Here's the G-score. The G-score has returned 1,500%. Well, the market, of course, the period is different because my paper was written only in 2006 or something. So they've taken a different period. And I think you need 2-3 years of data for some of those parameters. So as you guys can see, it's crazy overperformance, especially in recent years. Why? Because if you look at the kinds of firms G-score have thrown out at you, it would have thrown out companies like NVIDIA before NVIDIA took off, saying like, this is a company which is doing all the right things. It is growing, but its growth is stable. It's investing a lot in R&D. It's investing a lot in CapEx and advertising and stuff. Okay. Now, sadly, this is not the returns I have earned on this strategy because I haven't invested in the strategy, but this is returns somebody could have earned in the strategy, one particular implementation of the strategy, okay? But if any of you have lots of money and you want to set up a hedge fund, you have my email address, okay? Okay, all right. Now, the next topic I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to link this to the second topic very soon, is thinking about what F-score and G-score are. If you look at what F-score and G-score are, these are purely financial statement-based strategies. I'm just saying, let's look at your financial statements and break you up into good and bad, and let's look how well the good firms do versus the bad firms do. We are not considering valuation per se, but you can also do an alternative approach. So if you think about what the financial statement approach does, it is focusing on quality, high quality versus low quality. But you can also do a intrinsic value-based approach, which is, I'm not focusing on quality, I'm focusing on how you are priced with respect to how you should be priced. So the analogy I give my students when I teach this topic is, let's say I have two cars. I have a Hyundai Accent here, and I have a Mercedes-Benz S-Class here. Which is the better car? I mean, even if you're a diehard Korean patriot, you probably agree that the Mercedes-Benz S-Class is the better car. But let's say I tell you that the Hyundai Accent is worth 15,000 US dollars, and the Mercedes-Benz is worth 120,000 US dollars. And the Hyundai Accent worth 15, you can buy for 12. The Mercedes-Benz worth 120, you can buy for 125. Which is the better buy? The answer without a doubt is the Hyundai Accent, because buying it is a positive $3,000 NPV project. On the other hand, buying the Mercedes-Benz S-Class is a negative $5,000 NPV. So that is the difference between quality, and the second thing is pricing or cheapness. So when you have an intrinsic value approach method, what you do is you try to identify the intrinsic value. You can say the intrinsic value of this car is 120, but the market's pricing it at 125. Therefore, this is an overvalued car. On the other hand, in this case, the intrinsic value of this car is 15, but the market's pricing it at 12. Therefore, it's an undervalued car. So an alternative approach towards stock picking is identifying the intrinsic value, comparing it to the stock price, and identifying over and undervalued stocks. Okay, so there's this paper by researchers called Frankel and Lee, and they're one of many people. They use some formal valuation models. So you look at a firm's current fundamentals, earnings and book values. You look at expected earnings, like from analyst forecasts, EPS 1, EPS 2, you project it out and say, okay, based on this and some assumption about cost of capital, I think the stock is worth 25. That is what I call the V of the stock. The P could be, let's say, 20. If V is higher than P, it has a positive or a more than 1 VP ratio, that's a buy. On the other hand, if V is much lower than P, that's an overvalued stock. So this is what Frankel and Lee do. And again, they show that a VP strategy generates lots of returns. Now, the question to ask yourself is, comparing and contrasting these two models, how are they different? One of them is using a formal valuation model, and the second is using these FSA methods like F-score and G-score. Are they doing the same thing, or are they doing different things? And if they're doing different things, does it make sense to combine them? Right? So what this is telling me is, don't buy the Hyundai. Try to buy the Mercedes-Benz when it goes on sale. Okay? So you can combine value with quality. Oh, sorry, you can combine quality with value. That is, you're getting stuff without overpaying for it. Okay? So I wrote a paper in 2014 where we actually combined these two things. And I'm going to present a few tables just to highlight what these strategies are. So ignore this last column called leg peg, which is just an alternative measure. This is the VP ratio. And look at the correlation of the VP ratio with F-score and G-score. The correlation is negative. What that means is high F-score firms have low VP ratios, or they have higher valuation. And low F-score and G-score firms have lower valuation. And this makes lots of sense. What this is telling you is high quality stuff costs more and low quality stuff is cheaper. If something is cheaper, there's a reason why it's cheaper, because it's cheap. It's not very good, right? If something is expensive, there's a reason why it's expensive. Okay, like an Hermes bag costs $2,000. Okay, a knockoff might cost $20. Hermes is definitely going to be a much better bag. That's just the way things are. But what I'm telling you is, don't buy the Hermes bag at $2,000. Wait for it to go on sale, or go to an outlet mall or something like that, right? That is what you should be doing. So if you look here, if you look at this table here, this is just sorting firms based on their F score. As you guys can see, as F score increases from 3.5 to 6, G score also increases. But interestingly, VP ratio comes down. So when you're buying a high F score firm, on average, you're buying a very expensive firm. On the other hand, when you're buying a low F score firm, you're buying a cheaper firm. What if you condition on both of them? You can say, I will only buy the high F score firm if it also has a high VP ratio. Or I will sell the high F score firm if it also has a low VP ratio. Okay, that's what we do in our paper. Sorry, we can move on here. Basically, what you can see is, if you combine this F score and G score, this is the low F score firms. Among the low F score firms, the low F score firms that also have low VP ratios have the worst returns. The high F score firms that have the highest VP ratio have the highest returns. Obviously, there are far fewer such firms, but you have to identify them. Okay, so if the standalone returns gives you 6%, by combining the two, you can get like a 15% return. Okay, so essentially, what this is, I call this and for those of you who've lived in the US or Canada, you will know of a store called the TJ Maxx. You know, what is TJ Maxx? TJ Maxx is a store where you go and you say, man, I was able to buy this Hugo Boss jacket. It's normally $300. I was able to get it for like $70. So I call this a TJ Maxx school of investing. Okay, where buy the high quality firm when it's on sale and sell or short the low quality firm when it appears to be very highly priced. And doing that helps you earn very, very high returns. Okay, so summary is, fundamentally, when you combine ratio-based fundamental analysis, which essentially are focusing on quality, with an intrinsic value-based fundamental analysis, which is focusing on price, you're able to do the best from a fundamental analysis or equity returns perspective. Okay, and like in the paper, we show that this stuff is not driven by risk. The returns are pretty stable across time, and you can do much better than you would in each of these individual results. Okay, now the last topic I'm going to talk about is, can you think a little bit about the valuation of the AI space? Now, obviously, this last part, Sid said, Partha always does stuff based on data and so on. Not for this part. I'm just conjecturing. We are in the moment right now. I have no idea what's going to happen, and these are just some guesses. Okay, so but I'll give you an example, right? Any idea what the valuation of OpenAI is? It's a big number. It has lots of zeros at the end of it. Okay, but what is more interesting is OpenAI is growing incredibly fast. But OpenAI is, while it's growing faster, there is, as of now, no evidence of economies of scale. So basically, as its sales are like doubling every year, its losses are increasing threefold. So it's like it's getting exponentially more difficult for it to actually run the bigger scale of the model. Of course, it might reach a tipping point, and it then might go around, and it might become the next Amazon. So even in the case of Amazon, there's a very famous HBS case where a debt analyst predicted Amazon would go bankrupt in the next 9 months. This is in the year 2001. Clearly didn't happen, right? So maybe OpenAI is going to be the next big Amazon and stuff, but maybe it isn't. So firms in the AI space truly enjoy atmospheric valuation. Okay, many of these firms, essentially, they have revenues, they have no profits, they have huge losses and mounting losses, and they have incredibly high valuation. Also, many firms which are tangentially in the AI space have massive valuation. An example being NVIDIA. NVIDIA is not technically an AI company, but it provides the backbone for AIs with its GPUs and so on and so forth, right? So the valuation is incredibly high. So can we apply the insights of any of these things that we've talked about to pick winners and losers? Can we apply them to the AI space? Can we potentially identify winners or losers? Like I said, this is early stage thinking, and the truth will unfold itself over the next decade or the next 3 years or till whenever AI takes over the world, you know. So anyway, all right. So is there a bubble in AI stock valuation? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. So here are some people who feel that way. So this is a gentleman called James Ferguson, who is a partner of a UK-based macroeconomic research firm. AI still remains, I would argue, completely unproven, and fake it till you make it might work in Silicon Valley. But for the rest of us, I think once bitten, twice shy might be more appropriate for AI. This is precisely what happened with internet in 1999. I remember internet in 1999 when I just started off as an accounting professor, and I think Sid when he was finishing your PhD as well, right? If you owned the stock of a company and that company declared a profit, the stock price would fall. Because if you made a profit, it means you weren't trying hard enough, right? If you made a loss, it means that you are hitting for the fences. You're trying to hit see, if you made a profit, you're just a guy who places the ball between two fielders and takes a single. If you made a loss, it means you were trying to hit a six. And those are the companies we want to invest in, okay? And that was the 1999 view. So this person says that, autonomous driving was supposed to be the rage in 2017. And now it's generative AI. So this person, again, is not a fan. This is a person who actually works or used to work in the AI space. I think this will be the biggest bubble of all time. I call it the .ai bubble, and it hasn't even started. And again, this is all from a website, from a news article on this website called thefuturism.com. There's also this idea called the Gartner hype cycle, which says that any new technology goes through a period where initially people are on this upward thing of this hype, where and it reaches this thing called the peak of inflated expectation. And then disappointment starts kicking in. And this is, of course, I'm not saying this is the gospel truth. This is one consulting firm's view of the way things are have shaped up in the past. Others might disagree. But their idea is eventually some firms will be here where they reach the slope of enlightenment and eventually the plateau of productivity, right? So, of course, not all of these things are going to survive to get here. But the ones which survive to get here are going to be the winners. They're going to be the ones who are the Googles and the Amazons of the AI age. Now, can we, analogy of the tech boom, right? In 1995, the Netscape IPO was considered to be the start of the internet or the tech boom. Now, basically, the stock market went on a tear still around March of 2000, where the NASDAQ went from like 1,200 to around 5,000 in a 2-year period, okay? And there was a crazy IPO boom. In fact, you had something similar is happening right now. Back in those days, for those of us in the room who are old enough to remember, you had companies, you could be like, anybody from Bombay here? Okay. There's a Muchhad Panwala, okay? You could change your name to muchhadpanwala.com and your valuation will go up 100-fold. There were literally companies which are doing that. They were just putting a .com at the end of their name. Valuation was going up 3-fold, 5-fold IPO. Okay, and they had nothing to do with the internet. They just put a .com to their name, right? Maybe there's a .ai stuff happening right now. Okay, firms went public with little revenue and no profits. Now, one thing I want you to be careful about is whenever people come up with words like, it's a new paradigm out there, okay? The old stuff doesn't apply. Be extremely careful, okay? Because even if it's a new paradigm, the old stuff might still apply. I'll give you an analogy from physics. Okay, Einstein came, and Einsteinian physics essentially made Newtonian physics obsolete. Okay, so because of that, if you're visiting my beautiful town of Toronto, don't go to the top of the CN Tower and jump out saying that gravity doesn't exist. Einstein said gravity is not important anymore. It's going to end with a splat. Okay, and that's what happened with the valuation of many of these companies. All right. So people came up with new valuation metrics. So firstly, people use price to sales metrics for valuation. Why? Because you have no earnings. So you say, I will use sales, and eventually those sales will become profits, and therefore I'll use a price to sales multiple. In the internet boom, they didn't even have sales. They had web activities. Like, I have no sales, but 1,000 guys clicked on my website today. Of those 1,000 guys who clicked, I think 10 of them will buy. And of the 10 of them who buy, I'll generate some profit 5 years down the road. So they went one level above. So they were valuing companies based on web activity. Okay. In fact, there's a paper by Shiva Rajgopal and others called The Clicks Have It, where he is looking at the valuation of internet activity. And the other thing was you had major M&A activity. You had the AOL Time Warner merger, $300 billion, the larger M&A at that time. And that time it was AOL acquiring Time Warner. And everybody said AOL is such a stupid company. They are an internet company with the future. Why would they buy a boring company with just physical assets and royalties and copyrights and stuff? But this is the most brilliant thing AOL ever did. They exchanged their incredibly overvalued fake assets for some real assets 2 weeks before the market crashed. Okay, they literally took the last helicopter out of Saigon. Okay, as far as valuation is concerned, okay, for those tech companies. So like I said, the market went on a crazy tear, but then it fell back to 1800 in 2001, and it took many years for the market to retain its current valuation. Okay, like I said, for every Amazon.com, there were a lot of drcoops.com and pets.com and stuff, which just disappeared. Now, can you apply this sort of G-score approach to AI? And again, this is conjectural. I haven't done it. Okay, can one tailor the G-score strategy to AI? Now, maybe you need to identify the sustainable investors and adopters of AI. So companies, the language I want to use is invest in companies that see the value of AI, not just the valuation of AI. Like they're doing AI because it's valuable, not because I can tell people I'm doing AI and therefore my multiple jump threefold. Because those are the ones who are going to fail. They're in the AI for the wrong reason. Okay, companies which are creating meaningful, sustainable competitive advantage from their investments. You'll hear a word which PE and VC firms use a lot called the moat. I think that's something you need to think about here. What moat are you creating? What value that only you can generate, which nobody else can generate, are you creating? Right? Challenges of applying such an approach. I've told you that you should do this, but it's going to be challenging. Number one, investment doesn't equal success. Spending lots of money doesn't mean it's a necessary condition, certainly not a sufficient condition. That's the first thing. Second thing, okay, first mover advantage is not something which is always panned out. I know you guys are all young. I can ask some of the older people in the room, how many of you are former BlackBerry users? How many of you are current BlackBerry users? Okay, BlackBerry was the first smartphone, but within 4 or 5 years of the iPhone and Androids both coming on board in 2008, 2009, BlackBerry was dead. Similarly, the first spreadsheet was a company called VisiCalc. And then for a long time, it was Lotus 1, 2, 3, and now it's Excel. And now the whole thing has probably become obsolete with Tableau and stuff. The first search engine was, one of the early search engines was Yahoo. And let's talk about the most ridiculous decisions not made. Blockbuster had an offer to buy Netflix for $50 million, and they said, who the hell will buy this? And they turned them down. Yahoo had an offer to buy Google for like less than $100 million, and they turned Google down. Okay, so just to give you in the sort of annals of interesting corporate decisions. Okay, the other problem with AI is all this F-score and G-score relies on financial statement data, right? The AI numbers are embedded. They're not going to be disclosed separately unless it's some voluntary disclosure and stuff. So that's going to be a challenge. So what you might also need to do is you need to use innovative approaches to measure innovation and human capital, to measure how much investment is going on in AI. So what are things you might do? So success in AI will probably depend on two crucial factors. And again, this is conjecture, okay? Number one is financial investment in innovation and investment in human capital. So some of the G-score indicators already measure innovation. So for example, things like R&D and capital expenditure. The measurement of human capital is going to be a little more challenging, but there are some papers which have actually done it. The reason why it's challenging is disclosure is limited. Although it's increasing, it's voluntary, it's not standardized. You have to rely on voluntary disclosure. But there are papers which have actually done this. People have looked at, see, let's say you have two companies, both of them are saying, oh, we are going all in on AI. And you're saying, okay, these are both, I love these companies. How do you distinguish between them? Well, one company is saying they're all in on AI. And you go look at their job postings, they're asking for AI talent. And so their LinkedIn postings have measures of AI and stuff. They mention the word AI explicitly, right? So that's one. So basically, there's this paper by Daron Acemoglu, who was one of the people who won the Nobel Prize last year, where they look at measuring human AI intelligence in jobs, evidence from online vacancies. Okay. You can also look at the measure of AI-related disclosure in financial statements. So do some sort of lexical analysis and identify what are they talking about AI. And the interesting thing is you might actually use AI to look at the amount of AI which is in the financial statements. It might get a little sort of, self-fulfilling or self-referential, but that's something that you might have to do. Okay, so how do you measure the value from AI? So here is the deal. The value from AI cannot come from made up words like new paradigm and all those kinds of things. Eventually, AI has to generate value, which means it has to generate profits. To generate profits, otherwise it's just hype. Because in the long run, we're all dead. Okay, but maybe AI will change that. But as of now, we don't know. Okay, incremental profits, and again, I'm using a very sort of simple financial statement-based driver. Incremental profits have to come from incremental revenue. That is, I'm able to sell more stuff because of AI, or I'm able to sell stuff which I couldn't sell before, didn't exist before because of AI. Or it has to be coming from lower costs. I can produce at a cheaper price because of AI. I need only half the people I used to have, and so on and so forth. I can have indirect cost registration. I don't need to have as much of administrative expenses and so on and so forth. Or it could come from other issues. Like, for example, AI might reduce my tax rate because I get an R&D tax credit or investment credits or whatever the case might be. Okay. So you should try to look at these kinds of trends and say, if you've been investing in AI, I don't see any improvement in all these ratios. What's the point? It either means that it's going to happen much later or it's not going to happen. And that's the call you need to make if you're an analyst. Okay. So like I said, these are research ideas which have to be parameterized and tested. So anyway, so this is sort of the end of my presentation, at least the formal part. I'll be happy to take any questions from anyone in the time we have remaining. So stock picking is an art, and practitioners will use a variety of different methodologies to figure out which firms you think are going to be winners and losers. They might look at financial statement information. They might use their own in-depth knowledge of the firm and the economy. So hopefully I've given you some ideas from academic research, which is going to give you a starting point, saying that, you know what, there are 5,000 firms. Maybe you can apply this F-score and G-score stock screen to identify 50 firms on either side, on the plus and the minus side. And then I can do a deep dive myself and decide that, okay, you know what, these 5 firms look amazing, or these 5 firms look really bad and potentially shorting candidates. And I think FSA can also guide us in valuing AI stocks because, like I said, promise has to translate into fundamentals. Okay. Questions? Yeah, so if somebody has do you have a mic or something which you can pass around? Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a very wonderful and insightful session. My question is, we have various models to find the value of stock on the basis of financial statements, like discounted free cash flow model and a dividend discount model. But there are many companies who have negative ROE and the very high PE, but still the companies have a very high stock valuation. So is there any way to find, with the help of AI mechanism or any traditional approach, to find the market sentiment, which we don't see in the financial statement?
So firstly, if you have, let's say, no profits, lots of losses, and you have very high valuation, right? It's because of market sentiment. Now, the question you got to ask yourself is, do you see a story there which justifies why this valuation is high? In some cases, you might. You might say that, yes. Like, so for example, if you go back to the year 2000 and you look at Amazon, Amazon was a company which was actually growing in sales, but its losses were growing faster than its sales. But people said, this is the early stage of an industry, and these guys are truly making investments. And if they decide not to make investments, if they focus on profitability, they're going to miss out on opportunities. And so I will give them some leeway. So what you need to ask yourself when you're analyzing a company like this is this company a potential Amazon? Because like I said, for every Amazon which had growing losses, eventually reached a point where economies of scale kicked in and those losses started becoming less losses and eventually started becoming profits. And now Amazon is like, minting money or whatever, right? But for every Amazon, there were lots of other really crappy companies which remained crappy. So that's a question you need to ask us.
So the forecasting of profit or sales is the way to determine the valuation of the stock for the long run.
Yeah, but the problem, eventually it has to be, right? The question is, yeah, but the current profit or the current sales hopefully would be okay, but the current profits may not be there. But the question you got to ask yourself is, will profits eventually be there? Can you see a scenario? And the other thing I want to mention is people do this modeling using numerical scenarios. So they'll say, okay, best case scenario is 6% growth rate, worst case scenario, 2% growth rate. You should not be thinking in terms of numerical scenarios. You should be thinking in terms of economic scenarios. You could say, let's take the bull case that your particular product succeeds and I can grow sales, but I can also see a reduction in my costs at the same time and build that in and see how that model works. And second, bear scenario where your growth isn't as much, your costs are under control. What does it look like? So it shouldn't be. So most, like, all of us, we give our students, like if you're teaching a course like financial statement analysis, at the end of it, you do sensitivity analysis. Sensitivity analysis is just a 3x3. I'm going to use growth rate of 4%, 5%, 6%. I'm going to use WACC of 9%, 8%, 7%. And you'll have a heat map, green to red. That's not scenario analysis. That's just a monkey could do that on Excel. And AI can certainly do it on Excel right now, or whichever software it decides to use. Okay. So, but my point is, you should do it more in terms of economic scenarios. That, bull scenario, I see this, like my trend, and if this firm's ROE is going to increase over time, this is what I see. On the other hand, if the ROE is going to stay the same, this is what I'm going to see. So that's the way you should model, profitability and therefore valuation in cases like this.
Thank you so much, sir. It answers my question.
Yeah. Why don't we hear from this side of the room and we'll come back there, right there. Let's give him a mic.
Hello. So yeah, during the last 2 years, the S&P 500 has returned more than 20% since the AI boom started. And it's outpaced the European stock market so much that people have started calling Europe a corporate has-been. But I recently read an article on the FT saying that if you remove NVIDIA from the S&P 500, it actually underperforms the benchmark European index.
So to make a Tamil joke, you're saying NVIDIA. That's what you're saying. So, okay, sorry for the non-Tamilians in the room. But anyway, so the point is that outside of NVIDIA, the performance are reasonably similar.
Yeah, and that the S&P 500 is concentrating too much on the AI boom, and that Europe has kind of almost overlooked the AI boom.
Okay, so you have to, one thing I'll mention in anything, right? Source is important. Okay, FT is a European magazine, and so they're probably feeling a little left out. Okay, so the fact remains, and this actually pains me to say this because I live in Canada, not in the US, and almost every other country in the world has struggle to keep up with the US on one very important dimension. I'm not talking about stock market, productivity growth. Okay, there's a huge productivity. So when I moved to Canada, I think Canada's productivity, per capita productivity was 90% of the US. It's 15 years and now it's down to under 80%. So because no other country has kept up with the US productivity growth, and the US productivity growth may be a function of a lot of things, but certainly the sort of extremely dynamic innovation in ecosystem they have in the US plays a very, very big role. So it's not just NVIDIA, but NVIDIA also has multiplier effects, right? The availability of NVIDIA's GPU chips allows startups to work in AI effectively and so on. And so even so, for example, if you think about EVs, right? The whole center of gravity of EVs is two places. It's three places, actually, I would say. It's the US with Tesla. It's China. By the way, China is unbelievable. I spent 2 weeks in China. The EVs in China put the US and the rest of the world to shame, BYD and the others. Okay? But Europe is sort of playing catch up there. Why? Because they have a legacy world adapting. It's more like IC engine manufacturers trying to get into the EV game, as opposed to thinking of it from like bottoms up as an EV company, right? So I think certainly there's no doubt that there is a lot of hype in the AI space, but I think saying NVIDIA, you should take NVIDIA out, that's like taking out the most important thing. So to give you another famous, like a joke, right? Abraham Lincoln was assassinated while seeing the, I think, Our American Cousin or something. So the joke is, except for the last part, madam, how was the play? Somebody asked Mrs. Lincoln, right? But how can you exclude the last part? That was the whole thing, right? So you can't say, except for NVIDIA, the stock market hasn't done well. Well, NVIDIA is part of the stock market, and so therefore it is part of the index. So I think you can't take it out. Right. Question there? Yeah.
Sir, what do you think about special situation investing? Like you said, you want to get into high G score and F score firms, but then you want to do it when the price is cheap. So this special situation investing.
Absolutely. So, but see, I'll tell you one thing. In all these things, special situation investing is you're looking at companies which are close to bankruptcy and all those kinds of things, right? So
not bankruptcy, but maybe like temporary distress.
Yeah. Okay, whatever the case might be. So close to, like, essentially, if a company has an extremely low valuation, right? The question you got to ask yourself is, why is that valuation so low? And what do you have which that company doesn't have? Why are you confident that you can fix whatever ails this company? I'm not saying that some people don't. There are a whole bunch of PE firms which probably specialize in special situations, right? Or if you're even on the, like, if you're somebody who's a trader or whatever, you can identify undervalued and overvalued, like bonds or stocks or whatever in that situation. The only thing to keep in mind in those kinds of things is the risk is way higher, liquidity is far less. And so the amount of idiosyncratic risk you're taking in situations like this is much, much higher than normal situations. But also, I have to be completely honest, I'm not an expert in like debt markets or in special situations and stuff. But you see, the basic principles are universal. You should try to do the best job of you can of identifying either the real value as it is right now, or whatever real value can be there with whatever changes you plan to make. But be honest and objective about it. So I'll give you the inverse of it. Many people do M&A and most M&A fail. So very often M&A fail because especially they will see a company which is struggling and underperforming, and they'll say, you know what, I can come in and I can fix what's happening and I'm going to do it. And in doing so, they're doing two things. They are underestimating the problems, and they're also overestimating their own ability to fix those problems. It's like if you're in a certain neighborhood, right? There's one block where the restaurant changes every 2 years. But each time somebody comes in with a new idea saying, no, this is going to work. But then 2 years later, you'll have another restaurant, right? So that's the same sort of situation which happens. So you've got to be very careful in things like this.
Due to time constraint, we have time for one more question.
Anyone? Yeah, let's go to this side of the room. So all the way in the back. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The session was very insightful.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Hello. So I have a question related to F score and G score. So I just wanted to know that how reliable are F scores and G scores when we evaluate industries like renewable industries or the fast-paced changing technical industries? Because sometimes, the uh, traditional financial market matrices do not cover the potential risks. So how reliable are R score and G score on these cases?
It's difficult for me to answer it. The one thing I can say, which is an advantage of the G score, is the G score is a relative measure, right? So it looks within industry. So even if the number is very volatile, it's volatile or it's kind of noisy for all firms in that industry. So you're comparing within that, which is the best and which is the worst. F score is more of an absolute based thing, and therefore maybe it won't work as well. But G score probably will work better, but I'm just conjecturing here. So, all right. So thank you all very much for your questions. I think we're out of time, right? So, and anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. This was really an insightful session. And we really appreciate you telling us about all of those, such an important topic and thought-provoking in terms of, since AI is currently a topic which has become a boom and buzzword, and to speak and learn more about it was really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I now request our dignitaries to kindly come and felicitate and welcome our keynote speaker. Sirs, can you please?
I can disconnect this? Yeah.
As we draw close to today's event, I invite our beloved Dean and Principal, Dr. Suresh Ramanathan, to deliver the vote of thanks.
What an absolutely fascinating and riveting lecture that was, a session that Partha did for us. It was absolutely amazing. I wanted to thank you, Professor Mohan Ram, for taking the time to come here and deliver this lecture, this inaugural lecture. Truly worthy of being the inaugural lecture to honor Dr. Bala's memory. So I think this certainly touched all the boxes and kept the entire audience completely riveted. I must say that I have not seen a classroom that is completely full and paying attention to every single word that a speaker uttered from start to finish. So I think that is a true testament to the level of engagement that you were actually able to get in this class. So thank you so much for that. I also noticed several members of my faculty furiously taking notes on what research needs to be done and getting ideas. And I think that is a wonderful way to actually think about how this legacy can actually be continued, Dr. Bala's legacy, to basically think about how research in this area, particularly the topics that you addressed, and more, and some of the food for thought that you basically came up with in terms of AI, whether there can actually be research that can be conducted at Great Lakes through some kind of a formal research engagement or a center or something like that. I think that would be an amazing way to honor Dr. Bala's legacy, as well as to basically have you help us and shepherd that. I think that would be lovely. I just want to thank all the students here. You guys were amazingly engaged, and thank you for coming and thank you for attending this session. I think you made it so much more special simply by being here and being completely engaged. So thank you all. I hope that many of you will actually be inspired by the academic research that Dr. Mohan Ram actually presented. And maybe who knows, some of you may actually emerge as true winners in the investing game. So hopefully you actually get to apply some of this, read these papers if you can, and see what you can get out of it. And that might possibly help you in the long run. So to my faculty, to my staff, everybody who is here, thank you for being here, and thank you for always being very, very supportive of everything that this institute has done, and being here to honor Dr. Bala again. And so that's again very, very special that we are all here, to memorialize Dr. Bala as well through this initiative. So thank you, Sid, for inviting Dr. Mohan Ram. I think Partha was an amazing, amazing speaker for that inaugural session. I think no one more worthy of that. So thank you for that, and thank you for bringing him here, and to the entire board, to Mohan and to Gautam, also for their very strong words of support. So thank you all, and we look forward to continuing these discussions and ideas as we go along. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this morning. As Uncle Bala would often remind us, the world is full of challenges, but gives opportunities to those who dream big and continue to learn. For all of us, especially as students, the pursuit of knowledge is paramount. With continuous learning, there is no limit to what we can achieve. Let us carry on forward his legacy in both our lives and work, always striving to learn, grow, and contribute. Thank you. I request all the students to kindly be seated and let the dignitaries first.